In just under 9 weeks, I'll be running the Melbourne Marathon. Now, it'll be my 4th marathon officially. The first one was in January of 2022, and it didn't go so well. I was aiming to run around 3:10, but I quickly fell off that pace and then DNF just after 22 kilometres. The second one was in January of 2024, and I ran 2:56 in warm conditions on a moderately hilly course. I was happy with the sub 3, but I knew there was more in the tank, and so I backed up just 3 months later and ran a 2:49 at the inaugural Ballarat Marathon. Now, I was fairly content with those performances at the time, but since then I've had a huge jump in fitness. My personal best in the 10k has improved by 2.5 minutes, and if I plug my recent Lakeside 10 time into a VDOT calculator, this is my projected marathon time. And that is a very enticing barrier. Now, I've always known these calculators to be a little generous with the projected marathon performances. They seem to overestimate people's endurance. They may be about right for people who've been putting in 100-mile plus weeks for years on end, but for mere mortals like me, that marathon time is likely a little too ambitious. However, at this stage, I'm not ruling it out completely. I'll have to see how training progresses over the coming weeks, but it's far more likely that I'll be targeting a time in the 2:32 to 2:34 range. Now, that would still be a 15 to 17 minute personal best, and to run a time in that range would have been absolutely inconceivable 3 years ago. But I have a dilemma. I've documented the training I've been doing over the past few months fairly extensively in these videos, and I've continually said it works incredibly well, and it has worked incredibly well. But if this style of training has any flaw, it's how well it prepares your body's durability. One of the ways in which the system is so effective is how it never stresses your body too much in any one run or workout, but instead you accumulate load by way of frequent moderate-sized sub-threshold workouts and easy runs. You keep the training load nice and high all the time, but you never bite off a big chunk that's going to leave you requiring an extended recovery period. But here's the thing, the marathon is a big chunk, a huge chunk, and without the kind of muscular conditioning that long workouts and steady long runs provide, there's every chance that I'll get 30 k's in and my legs will fall off. But I don't want to abandon a training approach that's yielded such great results and such noticeable fitness gains. And so what I'm planning to do is continue with a standard Norwegian singles approach of 3 sub-threshold workouts and everything else easy right up until 8 weeks out. I'll then have a 2-week transition where I keep in 2 sub-threshold workouts but add a little bit of intensity to the long run. Then 6 weeks out, I'll go full-on marathon specific with a moderate intensity 20-mile long run each week, a big marathon specific workout, and a steady medium long run for good measure. Now, this may seem like heresy given how much I've talked up the Norwegian singles approach, but in my mind it's a necessary compromise. I'd love to stick with NSA in this period, and I'll likely try that experiment in a future marathon, but not this one. If I can put a good performance on the board here, it'll mean I won't have to stress about priority starts for the foreseeable future, and I'd like my marathon time to at least somewhat reflect the shape I'm currently in. But I'll be switching back to Norwegian singles in the taper. Once I've built that durability, I can then try to bump my anaerobic threshold back up a little while reducing volume and freshening up for the race. Oh, and I should mention, I received this email the other day. So that's another thing that's fallen into place. But back to the training. The other option that I considered when devising my training plan was to simply copy what the creator of NSA did for his marathon build heading into London. For those who don't know, that's James Copeland, known on the Let's Run boards as Serpoc. He adjusted the system to accommodate more marathon-specific training heading into the London Marathon, where he ran an incredible debut time of 2:24. So his modification was obviously very effective, and this marathon build has been circulated online. But when I look at this training block, I'm terrified. I know my body fairly well at this point, and I'm pretty certain it would break if I attempted to copy his training. And for good reason. James spent years building the volume of his sub-threshold sessions to the point where he was averaging 10 to 12 kilometres of volume per session. That means he was doing almost 50% more sub-threshold volume each week than I currently am. So he'd obviously built the resilience to be able to handle a short block where one of those sessions was up to 15 kilometres of volume at first, and then a couple of workouts where he pushed it to 20 and 25 kilometres. Now, James has since said that he thought this training was unsustainable, and that's my feeling as well. It was a gamble that obviously paid off well for him,
but I think it's too big of a risk for me to tackle.
Call me a wuss, but I've learnt through many painful lessons that in running, it's better to play the long game. Ultimately, I'm a hobby jogger and I want to keep hobby jogging as much as possible. So when my hobby jogger intuition is telling me the risk is too high, I'm going to listen. I know that the training that I have planned will likely result in my anaerobic threshold getting slightly worse, and maybe that ultimate sub 230 goal is off the table as a result, but I can live with that. And then there's a part of me that thinks, why even bother with a marathon? You're getting good results with the training you're doing at shorter distances. Why not just see how fast you can get at 5k and 10k? And of course, I do want to keep lowering those times, but there's just something about the marathon.
I know it's a total cliche, and don't get me wrong, setting personal bests at other distances is one of the best feelings in the world. But there's something just a little bit more special about the marathon. I think it's because it's so hard to get it right. So much can go wrong, and you have to put so much effort, make so many sacrifices just to get there on the day, healthy and ready to go and feeling good. So when it does come off, there's just this flood of emotions that comes pouring out and you don't really get with other events.
I once said to a fellow runner that my lifetime goal was to break 2:30 in the marathon, and he basically laughed in my face. And fair enough, this was 10 years ago and I had no business thinking I could one day achieve that. But it stuck with me, and it'd be nice to not so much rub it in his face, because I certainly don't hold anything against him. Again, if I were a betting man, the odds at the time would have likely been 10,000 to 1. But it'd be nice to see that pipe dream become a reality. And how often in life do you overcome those kind of odds?
But if I could one day do that, I'd be pretty content with what I've done in running. I'm probably not going to get it this time, but I'll hopefully get fairly close. And that'll be a stepping stone to get me there in the near future, hopefully. Or maybe I'll just say, fuck it, I'm going for it this time.
Nah, there's a million other YouTube channels that are all about the full send, but this channel, for the most part, is about sticking to the numbers. And the numbers are telling me 232 to 234 is about right. I've been running long enough and been beaten down by reality enough times to know that your body doesn't care about big round numbers. And maybe you think I'm getting way ahead of myself for even attempting to run under 235. After all, it would be roughly a 15-minute personal best. Well, I know there's no guarantee that I'll even run that. The marathon is brutish, nasty and long, and it punishes people who don't respect it. But to me, at this stage, based on the training I'm doing and the race times I've been running, that range seems reasonable. But on the day, the pace I set off at will be determined by where a group happens to form. Obviously, I'd like to stay in the range of 336 to 339 a kilometre in the early stages. But if I have to push a touch harder or run slightly slower to stay with the group, then that's what I'll do. Because running with a group makes such a huge difference to performance.
That not only saves you a huge amount of mental energy, it's obviously going to save physical energy as well. I don't have to worry about running into the wind or constantly fretting over pace. The task is essentially just reduced to keep with that guy there. And it's pretty common to have lots of little mental lags. You get a bit distracted in the race, and so maybe you just take your foot off the gas a little bit without realising it. And then a few minutes later, you realise you've dropped maybe 5 seconds a kilometre, and you've got to try and make that back up. But when you've got someone who's right there in front of you, anytime you fall off the pace, you're constantly reminded that you've done it because you've let a little gap open up. And so it's really easy to then just accelerate just a little bit and get back on. You don't open up these big, massive 5-10 second gaps to the pace you want to run. So how's training been going this week? Well, this should be my biggest week ever. Projecting 138 Ks. Previous best was 137, so it's only a marginal increase. But I won't really bump it up much beyond that throughout this marathon block. Yesterday I did 8 by 1K sub threshold, and it was the best in terms of average pace that I've done the session so far. 323s, just got a double today of 9K jog in the morning now, and an 8K jog this evening, and then tomorrow 3 by 3K on the track, I reckon. I think I might just go up there and treat myself to a track session, and then I'll double in the afternoon after that. Friday again, 8K double, and then Saturday I'm going to drop it down to just 4 by 2k, sub threshold, double again in the evening, and then I'm pushing that long run out to 27k's on Sunday, and that'll just be easy. And I guess that's where I'll leave you today. Remember, you can never take your hobby jogging too seriously.